to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Happy Thanksgiving. It's Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast. And you got Borg and Betz today.
No corporate. Couldn't show up. They took their Thanksgiving break early. And, we're here for you guys. Thanksgiving week is a really fun week in the calendar for not just, obviously NFL, because we get the 3-game slate, and then we get Black Friday, and then we get Sunday, and then we get Monday again. It's just football all the time. But in the college football landscape, Kyle, it's crunch time when we're trying to figure out, college football playoff and bowl games and all that sort of stuff. So coming down to the wire here on the college season, and I'm excited about today's show because if you've been listening, a lot of our context this year, right, has been like, if you're a contender, do this, kind of here's how we're evaluating teams and players. But if you've been sitting and waiting and you are the rebuilding team in your league, which Kyle and I both are in Dino Jr., where we're vying for, top 3 draft picks, our season as rebuilders is coming up, right? When we flip the calendar to January and we think about the rookie picks in this rookie class, then it's time to really kind of get down to scouting these guys. So I'm excited about today's show where we actually get a first look at the names in this class, which, we haven't touched on at all so far this year. So I'm excited to do that today.
Yeah, this episode is a little bit of a juke where you're used to your Thanksgiving content, and you're going to get that on the Footballers main show. The Megalodon episode comes out today, which will be over 2 hours long. But I thought it would be a good exercise in the middle of all this, before you get too deep into, December, where you and I take a look at the 2026 class from a couple different angles, okay? Because if you have rookie picks and you're rebuilding, you're excited. I also want you to pump the brakes a little bit because it is just on outset. Would you just say it's not the most encouraging top-heavy class?
Well, I was going to say, I think the general consensus right now is that it is somewhat top-heavy, but the top players in the class are not considered like elite prospects. Is kind of how I would say it's generally being viewed. So, not that these picks aren't going to be valuable, because every offseason we get to January, February, and it's the best class we've ever seen every year, no matter what. It's so funny how that happens, where like in the fall, you have a general view about a class, and then you get to the spring, and no matter what your view was back then, dude, these picks, these rookies, these guys are going to be all be great. Of course, that's not how it works. But I would say in general, it's kind of largely viewed as like a somewhat weak class, but the top names, we'll talk about it today, I'm definitely excited for. I just don't know that they're like elite prospects, I would say.
Yes, and just hear me out. Your rookie picks will gain value from here on out.
For
sure. So I was in the midst of a trade right before league's deadline, and I was holding somebody else's rookie pick. They really wanted it back. It's probably going to be a top 3 to 4 pick. And I said, the deal they're giving me is fine. But I know that in 2 months or 3 months, when we get to February, this pick will only gain more value based on someone either falling in love with a certain wide receiver or running back prospect, and just the fact that we get rookie fever. So we will kind of guide you through the process. Betz and I, way that we do it is we take a look right after the NFL draft. I have a list of, here are the top 60 prospects, I'm using air quotes, of what everybody thought right after the NFL draft for this next year. I also took an index in September, right before the season started. I've done it again in November, and we'll do it, when we start in January, starting to look ahead. Things have changed. I was told before the season there would be 5 or 6 quarterbacks that would be first-round picks this next year's draft. It's just not happening, man.
It's been a bad fall for the perceived top quarterbacks in the class. Every year there's like a late riser or two, and there are some in this class. But in general, you think back to the names at the top of the list in like August, or like, you remember after the NFL draft, every year somebody puts out like a mock like the week after, which is just absurd. Like, but people do it, like real NFL mocks. And there's always like a bunch of quarterbacks in there, and they're at the top of the top 50 rankings list. And then the season plays out, and whether that's right or wrong, it just changes so much, right?
Yes.
And you and I were talking like last week off air about this. The NFL coaches and GMs and their front office and all that sort of stuff, they're so focused on what's happening this season for the NFL that a lot of these guys, you have some scouts that certainly are in the weeds in the fall for the college season, but a lot of these like main decision makers don't actually get eyes on these guys until some of us do, January, February, March. And then a lot of it's recency bias too, where it's like, okay, well, what did this player just do? What did this guy just do for me this past year? What did he do in college this past year? Versus like their total body of work. So that's why you see so much change, I think, from the early rankings list in the summer to when you get to March and we get to NFL Combine season of like, oh, here's how it actually looks like it might shake out in the NFL draft. It's just wild every year how much changes.
Yeah, and it's not so much to clown on certain people or certain media members. It is literally just saying that it is a process. And it's okay to say at this point in November, here's the things we think we know, here's what we don't know. It's okay to admit, I don't know how this player is going to turn out. And then for us, the game that we play in fantasy, there's a different conversation. It's not just, is this player going to be picked a certain spot in the NFL draft? How does it translate to the NFL and into fantasy? So we'll talk about that in just a second. I'm excited to kind of get an early take on a couple of different prospects from you. But let's make sure we rewind the film.
Weekly Rewind.
So every single week, we make sure we start the episode rewinding the film. It is a part of our process that we think colors in some lines. It's not perfect. If you're a film bro or film gal, congratulations. It's really fun. It also, you sometimes look at the film and you see what you want to see out of a certain player. But you've had the pleasure of watching the film of Jerry Rice, a.k.a. Michael Wilson, who the last 2 weeks has decided to morph into an NFL All-Pro wide receiver.
Dude, the stat lines are just stupid. The last 2 weeks, 15 targets and 18 targets. Now, of course, no Marvin Harrison Jr., but I went back and I watched all those targets. And like full honesty, going into the last couple weeks, where it was like, okay, Marv's out. Michael Wilson, maybe he's like a fine double flex type play. Like you're not like excited to play him because you're not expecting him to be an alpha wide receiver one. That's how I thought about him because of what we've seen in the first 2 years in the NFL has been a, fine like wide receiver 2/3 for an NFL team, but like never a guy that you're expecting wide receiver one numbers for in fantasy. But these last 2 weeks, when you look at him and you watch him play, like they are doing things for him that you would do for a true wide receiver one. Like you look at his route tree and you kind of look at where he's running routes, his ability to not just extend the field down, for big plays, which he had done in the past. He's actually shown a lot of willingness, and the team has shown a willingness to move him around the formation. Use him.
Willingness or willingness?
Willingness. Did I say willingness?
No, but I was like, man, if you're using the word willingness, I would love that for a player.
I did not, unfortunately. But they moved him all around, and they're using him on high percentage type stuff that we always talk about in fantasy that actually matters. Like, get this guy in the slot, get him moving on crossers, get him moving on the easy stuff, like the easy buttons that they just were never doing for Marv. Like, it's so weird that they're doing it now for Michael Wilson, but they almost never did it for Marv. So I don't want to overreact to 2 games where clearly he's had opportunity, and the game scripts for Jacoby have been like literally perfect. Like they got destroyed against the Niners, so of course they were throwing the entire game. You get the Jaguars game this past weekend. That one goes down to the wire in overtime. Like it's just it all has been the perfect run out for him. But I will say with the opportunity, he's looked very good. I really like his ability to not just kind of make these tough contested catches. He's shown a really good understanding of zone coverage and how to sit down and just make life easy on his quarterback. So it's been a nice marriage between him and Jacoby. Obviously, things will change when Marv does get back on the field, but I think my takeaway from watching him, play these last couple of weeks is like there is a role for Michael Wilson in this offense. What does that look like? How much is the target share moving forward? That's all uncertainty, especially with Trey McBride, obviously the guy there. But yeah, I mean, if you had him on your bench for the last 2 years, he went from like a kind of like a roster clogger to like, oh, I'm actually excited to start this guy as a flex or a wide receiver, 2/3. Depending on Marv's availability. So credit to Michael Wilson. He has looked very good these last couple weeks, albeit in pretty good matchups.
He was an interesting pick when they took him a couple years ago in the 3rd round out of Stanford, where you're like, okay, this was not a consensus player. One of the things we do in our prospecting is we look at what the consensus is across all the mock drafts. And when a player is usually taken, a round or 2 ahead, we look up and we go, man, okay, so what do they see about this player? Is that a good thing? Traditionally, it's been a bad thing when teams reach for certain players. Isaac Tesla is one of those players this year where it's like, man, no one saw him going in the 3rd round. His rookie year I had to go back and remember how bad it was. He had the lowest yards per out run against man coverage of any player in the NFL. Like, it was like dreadful. And these last 2 weeks, because I went back and watched some too, where I was like, man, this dude is lining up, and the other team is treating him as if he's the wide receiver one. He's acting like he's the first read on it, and he's responding that way. So it's like, it's wild to see the transformation. Like, it's one thing to say year to year, like, oh, this guy's showing out in preseason, and we can tell there's something different. It's weird to say, oh man, this guy's really showing out in week 11 and 12. That's when the flip switched.
Yeah. It also is one of those things too that I was thinking about in looking at his kind of historical profile of year 1 and year 2, where obviously it was pretty uninspiring. But I also feel like we're seeing some of a renaissance for like year 3. I'm not calling him like a true breakout because this is a small sample size, but year 3 breakout type stuff where maybe it's a conversation just on the whole for how fantasy wide receivers are viewed. Whereas, like, you know, in the old days, and when I mean old days, I say like 5 years ago, we used to always say, okay, year 3 breakout, that's the classic sweet spot here for wide receivers. But because we've been so spoiled by some of these insanely good, talented young wide receivers that break out in their first year, we're like, dude, if you're not doing it by like the second part of your second year, like, you're dead to me. That's kind of how it feels as the general Dynasty community approaches this. But we need to remember, not all players develop at the same, you know, rate. Some guys take a longer learning curve. So I'm at least like leaving the light on of like saying, hey, Michael Wilson probably isn't what we just seen, but he's also probably a little bit better than what we saw in the first couple of years where he was just running cardio out there. So where's the truth on this? I'm not sure. I'm excited to find out. But like I said, I feel like you at least have a flex play on your hands where you just had a guy sitting at the end of your bench doing nothing.
Yeah, and we'll obviously have to see how they adjust with Marv back. The best thing is just let Jacoby keep doing his thing.
Just chucking it.
Just like, I feel like it needs to be one of the top priorities across the board, like FBI, government, like, make sure you protect this man and that we keep getting snaps. Like, this is a side discussion, but you and I were also talking about like the quarterbacks that have stepped in this year and then like gotten themselves the next contract where it's, you know, Daniel Jones, the big name, but it's like Mac Jones. He still has one more year, but he's like either going to like is a high-end trade piece that you can trade for that teams might want. Jacoby's the same way where like I know the Ballers have been talking a lot like what if he's their quarterback next year? So it's exciting to see because these are ancillary players. Same thing with Alec Pierce that we did not care about at all because we just knew that they were running routes and it didn't matter on the yards per out run and targets per out run. I mean, going into these two games, do you know his career targets per out run was 12.5%?
I did recall that actually, or know that fact.
It's bad.
Because on the DFS side of things, he was a guy I was like, I mean, come on, we've seen this guy in the NFL. Like, we know what we're getting here. And I went for the fade 2 weeks ago when he just
I did the same thing.
You went out and he buried me. But yeah, it's interesting. The thing about Alec Pierce that's kind of interesting too that I was mentioning with this like year 3 breakout type stuff. Pierce is in year 4, correct? He's due for a contract.
Correct.
But last year we saw signs of like, I don't know if you would what you would describe as a true breakout for these guys, but like for Alec Pierce's standards based off the first couple of years, he broke out last year, and now we're kind of finally seeing him really build on that. So yeah, just something to think about with some of the wide receivers on your bench.
Yeah, and it's I wish I would say there's something actionable. Like if your league still has a trade deadline and you can get, let's say, would you want more than a second for him?
I don't think you can get more than that.
That's what I'm saying. Like I think you're kind of just at a spot where you look at him on your roster and go, all right, I have something here that's maybe flex worthy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. Okay. I looked at a player that's maybe in a different dynasty stratosphere.
Slightly different.
It's JSN. I posted a clip of every single one of his receptions this year. No big deal. He's on pace for over 2,000 receiving yards. Going to break the all-time record if he stays at this. He's been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver 7 straight weeks, and he's only accounting for 47% of Seattle's total receiving yards. Like, he's crushing across the board. But the discussion I want to have more so is when we look at prospects, so some of the wide receivers we talk about today, including one specifically that I know you like, Betz, and I know that he's labeled as a slot-only wide receiver. JSN was kind of seen as that guy, that he excelled in that role at Ohio State, and then he got hurt. Then he came into the league and was kind of a slow burn where the first 2 years was mostly out of the slot. And I probably gave you way too many statistics that said, when there's 2 wide receivers on the field, he doesn't do anything. Okay. He is the great example of wide receivers we've seen in the NFL over the last couple of years where Justin Jefferson came into the NFL as he only won in the slot at LSU because that's what they asked him to do. And JSN has kind of done the same thing. Is there any other, like if a player is just dang good, then in the NFL, we can figure out a way for this guy to win on the outside. I mean, he's leading the NFL in every receiving yard metric and is specifically outside receiving yards, which is not something he had done the first 2 years.
Yeah, and if you recall back to like the start of the NFL season, particularly like over the offseason, when we had free agency and the draft, everybody was like, oh, it's very clear what Seattle is trying to be. You know, they got rid of Geno, they moved on from the OC because he was throwing too much. Like they want to be a run team, 2 tight ends, but how is JSN and Cooper Kupp going to even fit on the field together? Because these guys historically have been, you know, not only slot receivers, but like you think about their peaks as far as what we had seen in recent seasons, it was like, oh, in the slot. Cooper Kupp, you know, obviously is not the player he used to be, and there was some concerns about just like, what does this look like? But it's also a good reminder that, and this is easy to say in hindsight, but NFL teams like do have a plan and a blueprint most of the time. There are some franchises where I'm like, do they actually know what they're doing? But they obviously saw JSN as a true ascending, like top 5, top 10 type of talent at the wide receiver position. And they're building their offense around him in a really unique way where like they're planning on disguising what they're going to do because they're not going to tell you, hey, we're going to line up 3 wide receivers and shotgun and throw when it looks obvious. We're going to, you know, put 2 tight ends out there, give you a heavy look as far as personnel. We're going to play action and throw off of it, which honestly just fits Sam Darnold to perfection. So yeah, credit to this coaching staff and to the offensive coordinator for what they're doing there. It's been great. JSN is just unbelievable. He truly is one of those, you know, I think personally untouchables in Dynasty. He's ascended to that level where he's in the top tier. The interesting thing about him too, and this is again player archetypes and like what we think about players. Coaching staffs don't always do rational things, like what we think is rational, or you know, fantasy managers think is rational. And you know, Shane Waldron was just like giving this guy dinky little 5-yard ADOT looks out of the slot and had no plans to feature him. But if you believe that to be true, then you're like, oh, this player can't ascend to be the next great thing. So I think it's really important to like view all these guys and use all this stuff as data points, and then ask yourself, like, do you think players can expand beyond what they've been used at early in their NFL career or not? And it's hard to answer that. And obviously hindsight's going to be 20/20 every time. But yeah, I think typecasting certain guys into what they are, what they have been, sometimes gets us in trouble in fantasy. And JSN, I think, is the classic example of that.
I'm always so scared whenever I share statistics, specifically like on Twitter, because people will look at them and say, this is what you're saying this player will always be, when oftentimes the statistics we use are descriptive. Here's how a player has performed so far. So like you could have used a lot of statistics with JSN and say he's never really been successful with 2 wide receivers on the field. I could have done the same thing with like Jaden Reed or Josh Downs or Khalil Shakir, because that's kind of been their role, right? It's like, this is what they were. But I don't think any of us questioned, is JSN talented enough, or did they take him at a spot 20th overall in the NFL draft where they thought this guy couldn't eventually become a 1 in the NFL? Like that's where we had him. You know, I know for one of my Dynasty teams, I took him at the 102. So that's where I had him. That's where I took him. And I was kind of treating him as that and as that asset. But going back to the 2 tight end look, I know there's a lot of football guy talk here. But the other question we could have asked is, how can a wide receiver be successful in 2 wide receiver sets? There are teams like the Steelers who it's like cratered, like they cratered George Pickens because they weren't creative enough. But it also allowed certain wide receivers to earn way more targets because there's less wide receivers on the field, right? Like if there's only 2 wide receivers, your yards per out run, your targets per out run go way up. And this team thought, hey, we could be successful enough where teams don't know, are we running or are we throwing with 2 wide receivers on the field? So credit to Seattle, credit to them seeing like, hey, we're willing to depart with DK Metcalf and Lockett and just pepper this dude over and over and over again. So the film has been really fun. If you want to check that out, every single JSN reception this year, that was a fun task. But yeah, I have been Dynasty. I don't think I would trade him. Like you would have to throw me like Jamar Chase and And then we'd even have a conversation where it's like, I don't know that that person wants to trade him.
No. I mean, if you got him, just hold him tight and make fun of your league mates.
Yeah. Would you rather have him or Puka?
Ooh. Man, that's tough. I think still Puka, but yeah, that's coin flip, honestly.
It's not that tough a decision for me because just to, waft to my own farts, Jeremy and I have both Puka and Jaxon in the main Ballers Dynasty League. So we're just, we're just loving life.
Yeah, why not both? That's your answer.
Yeah, just that's the answer. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll talk about this next year's class. All right, so Betz and I are going to look at the 2026 class, and I'm going to use an asterisk there because when we get to the quarterback position, legitimately right now, we're recording right before Thanksgiving. It's like, I don't know if any of these guys are going to declare. A couple of them are going to stay. We're also not going to speculate on team needs and picks at this point. So like right now, I'm looking at the top 10, and it is the Titans there at 1-10, then the Giants, and then we have a bunch of teams right there around 2-9, 3-8. A lot of New York, a lot of new teams. New Orleans, New York, the Jets, the Raiders, the Browns. I mean, these are some bad teams. And then my Falcons, they're at 11, but they don't own that pick anymore, Betz.
Well, if they can keep this respectable and the Rams can have like the 13th pick instead of like the 6th pick,
oh my God,
maybe it won't look quite as bad. The other thing that's interesting about the top 10 this year, and obviously the exact order will change over the next month, but looking at kind of the top few now, like the Titans just took Cam Ward. Are they really going to take another quarterback? Probably not. The Giants seem to have found their guy in Jackson Dart. Obviously, the Commanders are down here because they've had just an unbelievable year with injuries. They have their guy in Jaden Daniels. The Bengals are sitting here. They've got their guy in Joe Burrow. So there are some teams that are in the top 10 that aren't super quarterback needy, which I think is going to drive in the offseason. You'll hear a lot of like, oh, the Titans are shopping the first pick. The Giants are shopping the second pick, like that kind of stuff. Wouldn't be surprised at all to hear that, just with kind of the fact that those top two teams aren't necessarily, quarterback needy per se, but there's going to be some teams here that are desperate to find a quarterback in this class. And I wonder what the general consensus is going to be, if that's going to be like these guys in a normal other class wouldn't be going top 10 type of prospects. Like I'm not there to decide yet, but I think we might hear that kind of conversation in the general media over the next couple months.
I mean, how many times are we going to hear about this team trading up in a mock draft? I've gotten to the point where Betz and I have this mock draft database, of everything that's happened in the last decade, basically. And so whenever we're talking about certain prospects, we talk about it for DFS and betting purposes, but, we talk about it for rookies. It's like, these trades don't happen the way that people talk about them. It's like, it creates a lot of clicks. Don't get me wrong. I love a good mock draft. I'll read one.
Oh, I read like one a day in late March, early April.
It doesn't, there's very few things that improve your toilet time like a mock draft in the middle of November. So it's there, but things will change. We'll find out which teams. I just know what's going to happen, Betz, because there will be a team that enters the final, week or two of the season, and, they're at the 5 spot. And then they had some backup, like Aiden O'Connell's going to come in, or Kenny Pickett's going to come in for the Raiders and win them a game. And then all of a sudden they're going to have a worse pick just because they let some dude cook.
Happens every year.
I know. It's funny. All right, let's talk about this.
Hey, rookie. Welcome to the NFL.
So there are a couple of different angles that you can take when looking at different classes. You can hear about what someone says is a great quarterback class. There's a great wide receiver class. There's a great running back class, which is kind of what we said about this past year's group, running backs. But you need to be able to understand there are different seasons in the offseason dynasty schedule for rookies. So after the NFL draft, we have here's what the media thinks are the top players and where they're going to go. So think about last year, here's all the names. Here's even the names before the college football season that are the hottest names. Here's the players during the college football season. And then at the very end, you can also get a run like we saw from Matthew Golden last year, where he improved his draft stock from being a 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, to like this guy's going in the 1st round based on what he did in the college football playoff. So things change a lot. And then in February, March and April, we talk about the film, the stats, the NFL Combine, the buzz that we're hearing, and that informs our rookie drafts. But what I just want to say is, like, you don't have to pick which season is your favorite. You need to gather in information from all of these. So I don't have the time in August, because that is a crazy season for us in our jobs, to be able to look at every single college football game. I watch most SEC games because that's where I'm at, SEC country. Betz has the pleasure of watching whatever season Penn State just had this year. Do you guys call that a season? What do you guys call that?
We're already moving on, Kyle. This year didn't happen.
Betz gets to watch, or you go to a lot. I mean, you went to that Oregon game, right?
Yeah, my wife and I usually try to go to a couple a year. Her parents have season tickets, so we go with them. It's a great time, like super fun. Love being there. But when I'm there, I'm not like watching to scout these guys. I'm just there to have a good time. So yeah, it's and like you, like I try to catch the big games in the fall. But man, with the way NFL is, like Thursday. And we're like 2 weeks away from like Saturday football games, by the way, in the NFL, because they do that thing around Christmas where they have Saturday games. But Thursday, Sunday, Monday, and like everything's on repeat. Like for us with young kids, Saturdays are kind of like the day to not sit down on the couch all day and watch football, sadly. But I'll try to catch at least like one or two big games every weekend if I can. But yeah, I mean, full honesty, like I don't have my head around this class or any class in general until we get to, February, March. So full honesty, that's where I'm at. I would not take today's show as like advice on certain prospects.
Yes.
That is not the goal of today's show. It's more just trying to, for us as well as you guys, start to get our heads around like where's the strength of the class, who are the names you need to know, that type of stuff.
Yeah, and so for me, like I watch most Georgia games because that's basically what people do here in the South. They watch Georgia games, watch most Alabama games, and then I'll usually pick whatever one or two other SEC games that are the big ones throughout the week. I mean, it's just, we get a lot of good games, okay? I feel like very spoiled that there's just
But I have to
every
ask
week.
about your fandom, because you live in Georgia, but your
Yes.
sister went to Alabama.
Yes, my parents paid for her to go out of state to Alabama. That's why my parents are Alabama fans.
So who do you root for when they play each other?
So, Betz, I had a moment, and people do fandom differently. We talk a lot about how people are laundry bros. They just follow a team blindly. I had a moment after college where I go, these guys aren't my heroes anymore. Like, I'm older than these. These are kids. These are like 18-year-old kids. So I would say, like, if my family gets together, I will watch an Alabama game and root for them. When Alabama and Georgia play, I just kind of back off and just say I want good football. But yeah, I'm at the point now where it's just like NFL is what we do. But I do miss those days where it's like I'm watching every Georgia game and I'm going to those with my friends. It's just different.
Do you go to a game every year now or no?
Yeah, I usually go to a couple games.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just a little different. But so let's talk about these classes. And what I did is I went back April 30th of 2025. So
Who
that
could
was
forget?
right after the NFL. I know. Okay. You can do this too. If you're listening, you can set a little reminder. And I have one that goes off every year, a couple times a year, where I just take a snapshot of who are the consensus top prospects. I could do this as like a freezing cold take and just dunk on every single person on the planet. But all it is a chance to say, what do people think are the top prospects? And so, Betz, I'm going to give you this. Of the 60 top prospects, consensus, okay? So it's not just like one mock draft. This is an average of what everybody thought right after the NFL draft. There were 19 offensive skill position players in that group, in that top 60. So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, the people we care about in fantasy. 19 of them. When I'm looking at that group right now in late November, 7 of those guys still exist in the top 60. Okay? 7 of the 19 of the skill position players. What does that tell you about making prospect lists in April?
They are at least a starting point, but by
Okay.
no means are they anything close to what the final mock drafts are going to look like, in a year, basically. So, yeah, like I said at the start of the show, too, so many of these NFL teams are evaluating the past season of what just happened, which is why there's so much shakeup in the landscape of prospecting. But yeah, that's wild. You said how many in the top 60? There's only
So
19?
19 offensive skill position players, and only 7 of those 19 are even on this list like 4 months later.
So most are projecting like a defensive heavy first round.
Yes. Across the board, it looks like the people that we trust and the people that we use the most, and when we do our prospect indexing, Dane Brugler, those type of people, it's a very defensive heavy group. And even the top names at quarterback have flipped a ton. When we talk about these quarterback prospects, we have to ask, are they going to even declare? But the top quarterback prospect right after April 30th was Drew Aller of Penn State.
That is hilarious in hindsight. I mean, of course, the injury doesn't help his case, but he was playing pretty terribly before that. But that's a perfect example of how much changes.
Yeah, if you're in a Superflex league right now, I feel confident that you might get 2, maybe 3 names in the first round, but those are based on need. I don't even know if it's based on talent alone and how it translates to the NFL. So right now, Fernando Mendoza, who originally was at Cal and is having a dream season with Indiana, is kind of consistently seen as, if he goes in the NFL draft, he will probably be the most pro-ready prospect. He's 6'5", 225. I wish I could use the word pro-ready and say that translates to what we're doing in fantasy, but that's not the same thing. But he is intriguing, and I think NFL scouts overall love the season they're seeing in front of him, and some of his wide receivers, including Omar Cooper Jr. I'm interested to see how that translates to at the wide receiver position, but Mendoza looks like a player that you need to know about in Superflex, but his scramble rate so far is just 7.5%. That's just meh. That's fine. It's not detrimental, but it's also not a plus in his bag for fantasy. He's kind of seen as the top name. Ty Simpson of Alabama is another name that's up there and yet also out of nowhere for NFL scouts. Like, he wasn't even in the top 15 quarterbacks before the season. So those two are kind of seen as the top 2 names. Dante Moore of Oregon is a sophomore. Who knows if he'll come out either. He's another name you need to monitor. And then I think my favorite name to talk about for fantasy is Lenoris Sellers out of South Carolina. He has the best scramble rate of anybody in this class. It's 13%. I just don't know how he's going to translate to the NFL, but he's a name that I think we need to put on the radar.
Yeah, for sure. And when you think about it's funny, the NFL readiness versus like game we play in fantasy is not always a 1-to-1 match. And when I think about like, oh, this guy's intriguing for fantasy, that 13% scramble rate for Sellers is definitely interesting. I think a lot of the general kind of scouting community feels like he would benefit from one more year in college to like kind of develop as a passer, but seems to be like a toolsy type guy that you can talk yourself into. For context on Simpson, he didn't start starting games until this year, and there's always one of those prospects that pops up, I feel like, every fall. Then you look at the data, and a lot of people have shown this over the course of time. Like, players that do not start a ton of games in college, it is at least a yellow flag in terms of prospecting moving forward into the NFL, and he kind of fits that bill this year. We'll see on him, but I think in general, you've seen a bunch of names fall and a couple guys rise, and we're still not even sure on like who's declaring in this class. I thought it was funny. Dane Brugler had a direct quote in his like most recent rankings list saying an NFL scout told The Athletic, quote, "The Oregon Finance Department will make sure Dante Moore is back." So now we have this whole new world of NIL and all that too. And it's like, hey, if I'm, a 20-year-old kid and I can make millions in college and have the best time of my life, do I want to do that? Where I'm the guy and we're going to win a bunch of games, or, go play for the Jets or something. So I understand why these guys are sticking around an extra year. And I think we're going to see a couple of the names that we thought were going to come out end up ultimately going back to school.
Yeah, that's the hardest part of talking about quarterbacks in this class is, let's say there's 3 or 4 guys. I bet 2 of them go back and they just say, okay, I'm going back to college. It is interesting because I used to be of the vein to look at quarterbacks and say, if you're old, get out of here. Like, I just don't like old quarterbacks because you want early declares. It's what we want. Like at the running back position, if somebody's 24, 25 years old, RJ Harvey, get out of here, man. I don't want you. But at the quarterback position, it's a little different nowadays in terms of how many starts you've had, and you're seeing players actually stay in school a little bit longer than what they used to because you mentioned the NIL type stuff. I'll give you one more stat with Sellers because you mentioned kind of the toolsy part. He's 6'3", 240. it's just a rare combination. South Carolina has not had a good season overall. They almost upset Texas A&M, and then they just farted around in the second half.
Oh, that was terrible.
Dude, I can't tell you, like, when I'm looking up and, my friends and I were always texting about SEC stuff, it's like, oh my gosh, they're about to upset Texas A&M, and then just the rest of the game was just silent because it was a slow death for South Carolina. But right now, he has 21% of South Carolina's rushing yards, which one of the things I look at is what percentage of the team's rush yards did you have in your best season? You need to be above 15% to even make noise in the NFL. So like Josh Allen was at 18% at Wyoming. Jackson Dart, who we've seen that in the NFL, that was one of the things that you and I pointed out. He did this at Ole Miss. He was at 22%. So Sellers is right there in that sweet spot where he's above the threshold that I care about. And if a team drafts him, you're going to draft a player that you're going to put out there that's going to have some wild outcomes. Like his range of outcomes is you're awesome for fantasy, you're really, really good, to are you Justin Fields? Like that's kind of what we're working with there, which Fields has been fun for fantasy, not so fun in the NFL. But when I look at the list of teams that these quarterbacks could go to, it's like, oh no, you're going to the Jets, the Raiders, or the Browns, aren't you?
You don't think Shitter's the guy? Why are you laughing, Kyle? That's rude. Real quick, I thought Shedeur played decent this past week. Credit to him.
It's
the Raiders. It's the Raiders, so come on. But yeah, I think the take home is like the quarterback class is, for the most part, not what it was billed to be a few months ago. And some of that has changed because of certain injuries and stuff like that. But just in general, it's a pretty weak quarterback class, I would say.
Yeah, I don't even know if Ty Simpson or like these guys aren't even going to be a part of the group. So we'll see about that. Running back's a little bit more interesting because the name before the season was Notre Dame's Jeremiah Love, and the name in the exact same spot. I mean, literally, I'm looking at mock drafts from, September to right now to where people had him. It's like, this dude's been locked in, and it seems like, so far from the people that we trust, he's still going to be locked in. He's 6 foot, 214. By the way, whenever I use measurements, these will not be the measurements that show up in February and March because everybody lies here. But Jeremiah Love is going to be the dude, right? Like, I feel very confident in him locked in as the RB1.
Not just RB1. I think every year there's groupthink, right? So like, I'm not saying this is what you should think or what we're definitely going to think, but I think the general view on the class is Jeremiah Love is going to be the 1.01, and that is unlikely to change unless something happens between now and February, March. But yeah, he's certainly the best running back prospect in this class. Dynamic, can catch the football, does everything that you want in fantasy. And I think when we look at not just production profile, we also consider NFL draft capital. He is getting a ton of round one buzz. Obviously, a lot's going to change between now and then, but he's the only running back that's a consensus first round pick as of this recording. So he looks like a very strong prospect, just kind of, at a top level view.
Yeah, in our initial kind of run, there seems to be a gap between here's who I would take at 101 and, okay, here's who's in the mix for 102, 103, 104. So, like, even in a super flex draft, but the way that we talk about a lot in footballers, especially in our ranks, and especially the way that Mike ranks people in his rookie rankings, is we're not just going to take a quarterback there because I need a quarterback at the spot. So I think Love is one of those people, even in Superflex drafts, like he's probably going to be the 101, and you should be very, very happy if you have the 101. And we'll see how the rest of your season turns out if you end up with that 102, 103 in your league. I'm in a league where I didn't mean to win, but I won this past week.
Was that Dino Jr.?
Yeah.
Good. I lost by 0.02, and I was so happy.
That's like if you are trying to tank, and we have rules against tanking, and you do your best, but you lose, that's like the best feeling in Dynasty.
You know why I lost? It was like the last Dak to George Pickens play in the game this past weekend. That's why I lost. I was so happy.
Oh, man. So beyond Love, though, I think there are a lot of question marks from where things were before the season. Like, there wasn't a consensus of saying, I think this is a first rounder, but the Penn State running backs, which I know you can speak to, were kind of seen as like the next best tier of Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. So kind of talk about where they've been. I mean, Penn State as a whole, here's the expectations before the season, and here's where it's at now and how that's affected their outlook.
I mean, it's been a pretty much disaster fall for everybody there, just based off kind of preseason expectations. And I mean, taking Oregon to overtime and like almost winning that game, and so much has changed since then. Obviously, James Franklin's gone and all that, but the shine on like the top names in this class, even, you know, Drew Aller, like you said, in last April was air quotes consensus QB1 in this class. Just sounds so silly to even say.
I hate that I laugh.
I mean, he literally has not progressed any season over the last 3 years. And I feel bad for him that, you know, obviously the season-ending injury, but he just was not showing any signs of progress. And the same kind of like shine on these running backs. I'm not saying these guys are bad players. They're very good players. The shine on the running backs has kind of worn off as the team has been out of the spotlight in the last, 6 weeks or so. But I will say, like, both are ultra productive. They came into school together as freshmen. Singleton was the RB1 in that high school class, number 1 overall recruit for running backs in the country. And then Katron joined him, and ever since then, those two have just been, the offense basically for Penn State. Like, every year they lack wide receiver firepower. They had Tyler Warren last year, but they really haven't had like a playmaker, a true playmaker outside of those two guys. So they have been the engine of the offense through and through. And I think it's funny this past weekend, and not to take anything away from Katron Allen, but he did set the school rushing record. And I was watching the game, the broadcaster making a huge deal about it. And I kept saying to myself, I'm like, well, yeah, but like, this guy's been here for 4 years, and it took almost the entire they have one more game left. We'll see if they make a bowl game, but it took the full 4 years to do it. So technically he is the leading rusher in Penn State history is Katron Allen. Nick Singleton can break the all-time rushing touchdown record this weekend, which is held by Saquon Barkley. He did it in 3 seasons. So, the production profile for these guys, though, is going to look good. They were the offense the last 4 years in Happy Valley. I think Singleton is kind of viewed as more of the, you always hear that like thunder lightning analogy for backfields. Like, he's kind of viewed as the lightning and Katron Allen is the thunder.
Fatter, so let's use this analogy.
Exactly. But they have a little different play styles, but both very, very productive. And I don't know whether they'll go in the NFL draft. I could see 3rd round, that kind of thing maybe. But they're on the radar as like probably early second round, late first round type rookie picks is kind of where I would say those guys are like penciling in it.
Yeah, it's love, and then we're going to have to figure out what the NFL thinks about a bunch of these guys.
Right.
The other names that you need to know, Michigan's Justice Haynes, who is from here, he's a Georgia boy. Jonah Coleman out of Washington, and then Love's teammate Jadarian Price. It is an interesting conversation there because Love is seen as this, first round talent, but Jadarian Price has been really, really good as well. 5'11", 209. So all of these guys, like if we get day 2 draft capital, that's when our ears are perked up. And so what we get to do until then is kind of see how they finish out the season. Not that Penn State's going to have a postseason, but if they did,
hey, they can make what's like the most, insulting bowl game you can go to.
See the Mud Bowl from Waterboy.
I'm picturing like what's the Duke's Mayo, whatever. Like,
okay,
that is the games that are played before you even realize it's bowl season at like 2:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. They might make one of those.
Maybe I'm a purist because there is a time in my life where I think college football was my favorite, other than baseball, of course. Come on, it's baseball. But I knew all the bowls, and I also had it on my calendar, and I would do, we'd have like picks competitions between my friends in high school. Like I loved that, and I knew which bowl games to count on, and I knew which teams were going to play in which bowl game. It's the Big 12 versus,
right.
Pac-10. Like I understood that.
I do miss those days.
It was a simpler time. I'm not saying we got things right back then. I'm not saying we weren't dumb. We were doing lots of dumb stuff back then. But that's the part of college football that I felt like was a disconnect now, where it's like everybody gets a bowl, and I don't know what any of these bowls are even called anymore.
And then half the guys that are, if they've got a little nagging injury or they're headed for the NFL draft, they sit out anyway. And yeah, it's lost its shine for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk about the wide receivers. Some interesting names there. All right, so wide receivers is the bread and butter in Dynasty. Let's be honest. If you have a young wide receiver, I don't know, like a JSN or a Puka.
Or Michael Wilson.
Come on, you're Michael Wilson even, then you are feeling really, really great about your life. I would say so far my initial read is that this is a good class, not a great class. And there are names that fit in certain schemes, and I don't know what those schemes are in the NFL that they will be attached to. So that's one of my hardest things when I look at wide receiver prospects. I learned this a couple years ago from Matt Harmon. So you know Matt Harmon probably from Yahoo. Years ago, he used to write reception perception for the fantasy footballers, so it was in the Ultimate Draft Kit. And my job was to edit those articles. And so one of the things that Matt taught me a lot is like, here's what this player played in college. Here's his role so far. Here's what he could be good in the NFL. And then if he goes to a scheme that's not utilizing those skills at all, it's like, I have no idea what this dude is going to be. So you have to kind of take all of those things and combine them together. So the first name we got to talk about is Jordan Tyson, who was at Colorado a couple years ago, now at Arizona State. He's dealt with an injury. Last year was a great season, 75 for 1,110. He lost his quarterback, Sam Leavitt, who was one of my favorite prospects that I was really excited about. We'll have to wait another year on him. And he's kind of struggled versus zone this year, but man, I feel like he's so smooth. And his consistent buzz the last 2 years, he's going to end up being in that conversation of being an easy first-round wide receiver.
Yeah, didn't he deal with injury at the end of last season too, if I'm not mistaken? So we kind of have that back-to-back years. I wonder how teams will view that. But yeah, ultra productive. Definitely a guy that I think is in the conversation as the top wide receiver in the class.
He's 6'2", 200. I would say he's not explosive. He's more like fluid. And the way that I need to explain him, like I think he's Olave. Where you look at Olave plays, like you just earn targets by the way that you get open on the field and your route running ability. So Jordan Tyson is the first name you need to know about in recent mock draft consensus. He's kind of seen as a top 10 overall prospect. I don't know if he's that. Like if I compare him to past classes and guys that went top 10, like Tetaroa or some of the other guys that have gone top 10 recently. But Jordan Tyson, and then we have a wide receiver out of Ohio State that is not the wide receiver out of Ohio State, Jeremiah Smith. That will be the next year. But Carnell Tate, if you've watched any college football, he's been around. They won the national championship this past year, 6'3", 195. When I was going through the prospects, I think he is my, quote, favorite prospect. I'm not saying he's the best, but he's my favorite to watch. But I think when I watch Ohio State film, I have a bias of watching every single other wide receiver that I've seen over the last decade.
And if they don't come out and they're not incredible, then come on. I mean, that's what these guys do. Yeah, it's so funny that Ohio State's so spoiled at wide receiver that every year there's like two guys that are going to be in the pros, and most people only know the one because he gets all the headlines and that stuff. And like, oh, there's this other guy that's probably going to go in the first round in the NFL draft too. Yeah, it's just year after year these guys turn out top tier wide receiver prospects. He's really fun, man. If you watch kind of some of his best plays, a lot of the big time catches down the field, contested, like really good body control type stuff. So he's definitely a fun upside type guy. I haven't watched a ton of his like nuanced stuff to know kind of how he wins best. But when I think about just what I've seen from watching, Big Ten games and stuff like that, like at least like once a game, he's making a huge play down the field. So yeah, he's really fun. I'm excited to dive in on him.
He seems to be another player that's in this top 15 to 20 range right as of right now. So just keep all of this with a grain of salt. I think when you're looking at your rookie drafts, so we talked about Jeremiah Love, I think you will have a mix of 3 or 4 wide receivers that you will feel comfortable with in that top 5 to 6 range, which is great. It's great to have that. It will kind of be on personal preference. It'll obviously be on landing spot. We'll talk about that a lot. But at the end of the day, if you're a first-round wide receiver, you don't have to overthink it. And a lot of times we look at certain teams, like the example we always use is Jalen Waddle. He's taken 6 overall. And you're like, but it's the Dolphins. We don't know how good Tua is. It's like good wide receivers and teams that draft wide receivers early usually end up figuring it out. You're starting to see that with Tetaroa and McMillan, where maybe you hated the landing spot. Maybe you didn't like Bryce Young. But it's like, no, this dude earns targets. And if you earn targets in college, you're probably going to earn them in the NFL. So just think about that with some of these prospects. But I think the prospect that we're most excited about, or at least like I like talking about the most, is Mekhi Lemon out of USC. He's 5'11", 195. And when I was putting together like our list of names, I did this to myself. I said, I bet this is the name that when we talk about it, this will be the guy he wants too. And this is like his type of dude.
I mean, I just like the good wide receivers. Is that bad?
It's not no, dude. There's good wide receivers the NFL doesn't quite understand, like Terrace Marshall Jr. You know, good. The NFL doesn't get it.
We're still waiting for that breakout, Kyle. It's coming. He kind of profiles as one of those guys that when you think about how the discussion is going to go on him in 3 months, there's going to be a lot of like, well, the testing wasn't great.
Exactly.
Is he big enough to play on the perimeter? Like, is he a slot only guy at the NFL level? Like, you're going to hear a lot of that. But as we just talked about with guys like JSN, obviously I'm not making that comparison with Lemon, but just the NFL figures out ways to use their most talented players if they are that good. I don't know if he'll be that good, but like at least when I watch him and you look at some of his production and stuff, like the dude seems like a good football player. He's probably not the flashiest. He's probably not the best receiver in the world, but he will get the job done. And so he does profile as like the type of guy that I personally attach myself to, where it's like, I don't know, just I like drafting the good guys and not worrying about chasing like the theoretical upside and traits type stuff. I kind of felt that way about like Ibuka this last year, where a lot of the conversation on him was like, okay, yeah, he's like a nice floor NFL wide receiver, but like how truly great can he be for fantasy? I think we as a community, I'm not saying you and I, but just in general, fantasy players, dynasty players, we have this like binary approach of like this guy is a floor play or like a ceiling play, but anything can happen in that range of outcomes. Like nobody actually knows. For example, Wan'Dale Robinson popping up for 40 points this past weekend or whatever it was with Jameis. It's just hard to archetype these guys. So I think he is a very good productive wide receiver who profiles well at the NFL level. Is he the flashiest? No, but I think he'll be productive.
Rookie sensation, wide receiver out of Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka.
Man, I wonder how many times, and maybe you could make this into whatever type of drinking game you want, how many times he's going to be compared to Amon-Ra.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, the SC connection too.
Yeah, slot out of SC. He's not prototypical. Hopefully he doesn't like gain the Amon-Ra, like everybody hates me and I'm going to use this against me forever.
It worked.
It worked for the NFL, but personality-wise, he's still not my thing, man.
Yeah, you don't like the tryhards.
It's not so much he's a tryhard, it's just that he built his entire personality around the fact that everybody doubted him on one day of his life.
and now those doubts are obviously non-existent, so it's funny.
Well, no. To him, it's every day. Read the names.
You think he's still waking up saying the names?
Oh yeah, dude. He is looking at who did the Titans take that year? Like Dez Fitzpatrick.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
So it's guys like that he's bringing up. So Mekhi Lemon is a name that I think early on I like. I hope the NFL likes him as much, and we'll see where the combine testing and all that stuff. His film against Iowa, I just rewatched it. It's really, really fun if you want to look that up. Denzel Boston for Washington is a big body receiver. He's 6'4", 209. He's probably going to end up being that traditional X wide receiver. I almost hate that Rome Odunze is like the comparison because it's also Washington, but like that's the role that he's playing for the exact team. So that's interesting. One of the players that I'm most interested, it's like I have a big question mark early on. Like I have this list and I have little notes that's just like my thoughts, is Chris Bell out of Louisville. He's 6'2", 220. So he's kind of like a bully with the ball in his hands, that a lot of times they give him these in-breakers where it's just like, dude, nobody wants to tackle him. No, in the same way, like Debo, nobody wants to tackle Debo when he gets a full head of steam. And my early notes are, I feel like he can be Rashee Rice, but he has worse hands. So that's a bad problem when you're Rashee Rice who's getting peppered with targets. So he's an interesting player I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I haven't watched a ton of him yet, but I'm definitely intrigued by him for sure. The note that you put there about being a bully on in-breakers makes me kind of feel like when you watch him play and when you get him in the NFL, do these guys have the same like tackle breaking ability over the middle of the field in the NFL that they do in college? That's the question that I have, because it's like, if you can do that in college, great. But remember, when you go to the pros, every single player is faster,
right,
stronger, all that stuff. So I don't know my evaluation on him obviously yet, but like knowing that that's kind of the preconceived idea of him, I'm excited to dive in more of like his true NFL potential as like a route runner, if that makes sense.
It's interesting when you think about, I used the Debo comparison at South Carolina. He was that dude, and then the NFL, it felt like he got even more fearsome.
Yeah.
Like it's just like it's just kind of known. But then like Xavier Legette was that dude for 1 year at South Carolina, where it's like nobody wanted to tackle this dude, and he looked 5 times bigger than everyone else. He gets to the NFL, it's like, it's not really the same yak ability. Obviously a different player, but interesting. And then one more name, you can bring up anybody else you want, is Casey Concepcion, which
That's
I
fun
love
to say.
getting to. Oh, dude, it's super fun. As somebody who took French for 8 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, dude, middle school, high school, I even took it in college. I'm not saying I was great at it.
Oh, so you're not fluent.
I could have a conversation.
Nice. That's a fun fact about you. You
and
seem
I
like more
could
of a
read
German
it.
guy.
What?
Yeah, I don't know.
Man.
You give off that vibe.
Nah, dude.
You don't seem like you're into the finer things to speak French.
Oh my God. Dude, come on. I consider myself a pretty educated, well-read person.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. Well, Casey Concepcion, he was at NC State, now at Texas A&M, who has had a really fun year. If you haven't watched Texas A&M football, they've had a really magical year. But he's 5'11", 190, and I just, the way that they use him, I think he will translate really well to the NFL. He's kind of slippery. He's crafty. He has good hands. He's also explosive. So I like, when I watch the film of him, I'm like, this dude's going to work in the next level, but I also know I don't want to play at my flag too soon. And maybe
Right.
it's also me being able to pronounce the last name that makes me a little biased.
I mean, is there anything better than when you have your rookie draft and you get to pick him and say his last name? That at least is worth a bump in the rankings. I mean, come on.
Well, that's what I have to do because, for the Ballers Dynasty League, you have to phone in your picks in the same way
course.
you do for the NFL. You have to call a number and they read off a card and everything. It's a big deal.
Well, whoever's announcing this year better practice up on their pronunciations.
Overall, I think, so my early guess is we're going to see 4, maybe 5 wide receivers in that mix to be, top 40 players.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I don't know if I see multiple top 10 picks, though.
No, I think that seems like that's definitely not the way scouts are viewing it. I think we could see how many wide receivers right now, and obviously this will change, but like where would you put the line at number of wide receivers that go in the first round?
4.5.
Wow. I was thinking more like 3.5. That's not a huge difference, but I mean, if we get 4 or 5, but then that makes this rookie class feel better than I think most people think.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying is 4.
Yeah, probably somewhere around there.
Yeah. All right. We've gone too much in the weeds of lines and figuring that stuff out. But anyway, I do think there's a good mix of archetypes, and there will be players who Matthew Golden and jump up in this group that we'll find out later. There's also names before the season. If you looked at like who was part of the group, and it's like that dude is nowhere to be found. Nick Harbor of South Carolina is a mammoth of a man. He was the player, if you saw on the news, where the Texas A&M sheriff or guy basically like caught him in the tunnel. Yeah, so that was Nick Harbor. And then before the season, Antonio Williams of Clemson was kind of seen as like a top 2 or 3 wide receiver. Clemson's had a bad season, so they're not on the list either. So it's always hard when you look at toolsy players and you see how they translate to how the NFL thinks about them. But the other side of this that you need to realize is if a team has a bad season in college football, a lot of times their players are just punished across the board. It's just like they had a bad season. It's not working out. You're not hearing about like
anybody
some of
from
these
Clemson.
teams. Yeah. Kate Klubnik, like all of these names are just off the board. So wide receivers is interesting. And then tight end, as we close, there's really only one name. I mean, there's some fun names. I'm sure we'll talk about these more as we care about the NFL Combine a lot for tight end because it tells us, do their yak skills translate? But Kenyon Sadiq of Oregon is really the only name, and he's been pretty consistent the whole way through, 6'3", 245, and dude is jacked.
Correct.
He's really the only name.
Yeah, he's the only guy getting first round buzz right now, and maybe even only guy in the top 40, I would say 45. Maybe we'll see if that changes. But yeah, he's only 20 years old right now, which in March will turn 21. But still, like, think about the prospects that we like to hang our hat to, right? Where these guys that are young, highly athletic, at least we think he's highly athletic. We'll see what his testing looks like. Dude looks like a monster out there. So super young and productive. And this past weekend, they played USC, Oregon did. He went off for 672 and 2 if you want to catch some of his highlights there. They're pretty fun. Interesting type of guy that, like, I don't know where he will fit in the NFL as far as tight ends, like the traditional inline guy or these kind of like hybrid-y guys or whatever. But I mean, they had him running like legit wide receiver routes from the perimeter this past weekend. So it's intriguing for his potential upside. That creates a whole issue when we think about NFL because teams don't always view these guys as like trustworthy in that role, as we've seen with, Pitts and that kind of archetype. But dude is out there winning as like a legit wide receiver one. So he's a fun player, man. Very, very, very fun guy to watch. Excuse me.
I feel like I've come a long way with tight ends where, I want to look at the athletic traits. I want to look at the production. But the way that teams are using certain tight ends, it's like I'm starting to understand that really smart teams at least, understand how to use an inline tight end well and not just split them out Kyle Pitts wise. Sorry, maybe there's some pessimism there. And just figure out this is a slot. If you're drafting a tight end to be a slot wide receiver, you're basically drafting a really not great wide receiver.
Yeah.
You're exposing actually part of your game plan. That's what Seattle's been so good this year. Like AJ Barner, I know we talked about him a couple weeks ago. The way that he's used is like, I don't know what he's doing on this play. And they draft Elijah Arroyo as well this past year, but like good teams, the Rams use a ton of 13 personnel and 12 personnel. It's like, dude, whoever the tight end is, Colby Parkinson who caught a touchdown, Davis Allen or, Turd Ferguson, whoever it is in the mix, it can work. So I'm interested about Sadiq and how teams view him. And then some of these other names, I right now don't have any of them in the top 60. So I'm going to wait, figure that out later. But any final thoughts on just 2026 rookies as we're at right now and just how you're handling it? So let's say you end up with the 103 or 104 right now in Dino Jr.
I think I will.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that pick. I don't think it's a slam dunk class by any means, but I think there's going to be a couple of really good players in that first round. I feel like having this conversation has made me realize the back of the first round probably is going to be decently weak, I would say, is kind of how I'm at least approaching it as of now, which is actually very helpful to know because I do have like one or two leagues that are still, trade deadline is still open. And if you are a contender in those formats, of course, anything can change and you can hit on certain players in any part of your rookie draft. But I think the general consensus is these late firsts are not super, super sought after, or at least they won't be quite as valuable. They will be sought after because they are every year when we get to February, March. But I think if I'm a contender, having this conversation today has made me even more confident. Like if you need a guy to go win a title this year, I'm definitely good shipping off, the 111 or whatever in this class.
Yeah, last year I feel like we talked about how there was a lot of players in that early second round. It was like, oh, I'd love to have a pick there because they all feel like they're kind of the same pick. The way that I'm looking at this right now is if I have the 107 through 112, I'm like, they're all kind of the same to me as of this recording.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Maybe we'll see some players pop up where like these early second round picks, they'll gain some steam because there were players there this past year. It was like Cam Scadaboo went as the 203, 204 in a lot of drafts. Like, oh, that was a great pick if you're willing to wait it out and see that. But just remember, your rookie picks, they will gain value. So the players we talked about then, somebody in your league is going to fall in love with, Mekhi Lemon because they heard about it on a podcast one time from two people, or they heard about, Kenyon Sadiq, like, I need a tight end in my tight end premium league where we get 3 points per first down or whatever it is. They're going to be all about that. So anyway, stay with us. It's going to be a fun off season, especially when we get to January. Betz and I will be going deep in the film, every single route, all that stuff from all the players. So that's going to do it for this episode. If I can find the button and do my job, there it is. We will talk to you again next week after Thanksgiving. Make sure you take time with your families, acknowledge them, tell them they're there and you love them.
But also ignore
Goodbye.
them and watch all the football.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.